What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is the Blacklist Season 5, Episodes 1 through 5 review. Yeah, 5 episodes to review all at one time. I'm not sure I'm ready. So, basically how I'm going to handle this, I'm going to go through each one and talk about the case in each one and sort of my thoughts on it and how it worked. And then I'm going to go back and talk about the overarching storylines, because honestly, in shows like this where you have overarching storylines, it's going to be very difficult to try to separate the episodes. I tried with The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow and Supergirl, it's easy because there were only 2 episodes. But for this is 5 episodes to try to remember exactly which episode happened, what happened in that episode, what did Tom do in that episode, what did Red do in that episode. So, just going to talk about the overarching storylines all together. But first, we'll talk about each of the cases individually. So, first case in episode 1, Smokey Putnam. This guy who apparently is part of some sort of carnival troupe or something. For some reason, Red is like, hey, I want to be a bounty hunter. And so takes this pay from this guy to go pick up this guy named Smokey Putnam. And so he and Liz go to go find him. They do manage to find him, but then as they're trying to take him away, they get pulled over by some marshals, only to find out that apparently they are not marshals. These are neo-Nazis that are trying to kidnap this guy for some reason. So, yeah, it happens. But they do manage to track him down and, get the Smokey Putnam guy from Liz and Red. So they kidnap him. Liz and Red go track them down, manage to get him back. But Red sort of convinces the leader of this neo-Nazi group to say, hey, give me the guy and I'll make sure you walk. And of course Liz is not okay with this, but she doesn't really have a choice in the case. So they take him to his trial, only for Red to kidnap the woman who's going to testify against him, because apparently he needs both of them to help run his criminal organization, because he's trying to build it from the ground up. And so apparently this woman is very good with numbers. Smokey Putnam is very good with his technical abilities and setting up certain things, which we do see in a later episode. But yeah, so this whole episode was just getting Smokey Putnam and a woman who apparently knows him really well, was going to testify at his trial, to start working for Red. So yeah, that's all it leads to. Liz ultimately says at the end of the episode that they catch the neo-Nazi leader. So it all works out, and it's a pretty decent first case. You've got some interesting twists here and there, with the guy getting kidnapped and then they have to track him down. Some intense scenes between Liz and Red because the new dynamic between father and daughter. We do see that Liz is trying to be her own person, but dealing with the fact that she is Raymond Reddington's daughter. I do like that dynamic, and a lot of it shows in this first episode with this, how they handle this case and the different, twists and turns it takes. Reddington's plan slowly being revealed. It's very interesting to see her reactions now, because obviously she's pissed that she has to let a neo-Nazi leader go, but then at the end of the case, whenever Reddington reveals what his plan was all along, she actually seems like she's okay with it. So this is kind of where the dynamic first begins, and it was handled pretty well. And then we get into the second episode, Grayson Blaze. This guy is apparently some sort of art thief. Yeah, these kind of are handled a little bit strangely, and some of them are more meaningful than others. This one, honestly, is probably the least memorable out of all of these episodes, and the main reason being because I don't really know why this all happened in the first place. Because at first it sounds like Raymond Reddington wants this Grayson Blaze guy to sort of stand up for him, put his name out there, because he's trying to get his name back out there and trying to regain the trust of the people that don't think he has any money or don't think he has any business. And so he is saying, hey, if we start working with Grayson Blaze and he's putting my name out there, well, now people start trusting that I have money again. And so it sounds like that's what they're trying to do, like they're trying to convince him that Raymond Reddington is back to being the Raymond Reddington everybody knows. But ultimately that plan fails because Red just tells him, yeah, I've got no money, this is all fake, but here, have this painting, to which he then calls the police on him for having the fake painting, and then goes to his estate so they could rob him of some sort of penny. So I'm not entirely sure if this was all just to rob him for money or what. It's not very well explained at the end. They did offer some sort of explanation, but it was so rushed that I don't know, I couldn't get behind it. It's not something that I'm just going to remember because it's not that meaningful. All of this entire case was just set up so he could rob a guy. That was it. It felt like there was an easier way to do this. It felt like there's a better way to handle this than making it seem like you're doing this one thing the entire episode, just at the very end to switch it around and be like, oh no, it wasn't that at all. It's actually this. So, yeah, definitely not one of the more memorable episodes as far as the case is concerned. But we do get to see a little bit more of, like I said, the interaction between Liz and Red, their new dynamic, trying to figure each other out. So that part of it was still interesting. It was just the case itself didn't really stand out as memorable. Then we move on to the third episode, Miss Rebecca Thrall. She definitely stood out a little bit more, mainly because the idea behind this person was so it was kind of scary to think about. Because basically what it was, she works for this guy, some kind of insurance company. I don't really remember how they described it. But basically, if they had somebody who was like a problem customer, I think, they threatened cops pretty much. Whether they had something on them or whether they were pretty much blackmailing them. They had these cops go in and set up a crime scene to make it look like this person did something, like pulled a gun, threatened their lives, so they had to shoot them. I'm just like, yeah, that's a scary thought. Just the idea of a cop coming in and be like, freeze, and she's like, okay, I've got no weapon on. You're holding something. Shoots me just because I'm holding my phone, and then sets up the crime scene to make it look like I shot back. Yeah, it's kind of a scary thought. And ultimately, we do see one of these get stopped right in the act. We see a woman pulls over this guy and like goes to shoot him, and he's just like, whoa. He's like, hang on, I'll get it. Hey, whoa. It's like, oh, I got no gun. And yeah, you could tell she didn't want to do it. He was freaking out, scared out of his mind. It was a pretty intense situation. So ultimately, though, they do manage to stop the woman cop before she can kill the guy, and then bring her in for questioning so they can find out, who contacted her and get the information they need to stop this Rebecca Thrall. I'm trying to remember how it tied into Reddington. I feel like it did somehow. Maybe not. This one, it definitely felt more like I guess just a random case that Red gave them, because that is kind of what this beginning of the season sounds like. It sounds like he is giving them certain cases just to sort of get them off his back, because, the very first episode, Cooper's just like, look, I can't just let you run around free. You've got to start giving us names. So I think this may have just been a random case. I don't remember how it tied in at the end, but ultimately they do manage to stop her. They do manage to bring her in so that way she doesn't force anybody else to kill other people, which is nice. But then we get into the fourth episode, The Endling. This one had a much more, emotional impact in the end, because we find out that this person apparently has been stealing these rare artifacts or something like that. And so all of a sudden we find out that apparently a princess is being targeted, only for her assistant to be taken. It's like, wait a minute, why does she want your assistant? What's going on? We come to find out that apparently the assistant is not really an assistant. She has this blood that apparently only 7 people in the world have. And basically what the blood does is you can transfuse it into anybody and it'll work. If anybody else's blood gets transfused into them, they'll die. But their blood is pretty much like anybody can use it. Whether you're type O, type A, type B, it doesn't matter what type you are. If you infuse this blood into anybody else, it'll work as a transfusion. And so we come to find out that apparently this woman who is the Endling, she has a son that she lost when he was at a young age, when he was a baby. And so she wasn't able to take care of him. Came to find out that apparently he needs a blood transfusion, and he has the golden blood, which means she needs somebody else who's got golden blood, because they need to do a heart transplant to make sure that he's okay. And so that's why she kidnapped this woman. Ultimately, the team finds her before they can cut the heart out of this woman. But Reddington says, "I'll help you. Just bring your son, and we'll save his life." Come to find out, apparently she's got golden blood too, and so they take her and her son to the doctor Nick that Liz has been friends with and Tom has been talking to for these first few episodes, which I'll get to, and ask him for help. And then she's like, I knew this day was coming. I knew I had to sacrifice myself to save my son. And then takes the gun and shoots herself and kills herself so that they can transplant her heart into her son to save his life. I'm just like, that sucks. That sucks. Ultimately, I don't remember how this ties into Red and his empire either. It's kind of weird. Like, I can remember the cases very well. I can remember most of the side stories very well. But there are times whenever it doesn't feel like certain things connect, and I think they do. But this is another one that I feel like, in the end, I even remember Liz asking him, what is the end game here? What does this help you accomplish? And he says something about, I just wanted to keep her from butchering people, or butchering more special people. So, yeah, I don't know if this was just some random thing or if there's actually a plan in place. But this one, I'm fairly certain they don't explain how it ties into Red. He just says, I just wanted to help these people. So we get into the last one, episode 5, Ilyas Surkov. And this one definitely was a little bit more of a twisty-turny case, because we hear about this guy, Ilyas Surkov, who apparently is a terrorist and he's been attacking for a long time. But Red comes in and says, no, he's actually been dead for several months now, even though he's had several terrorist attacks in the past few months. And so the team's like, well, how's this possible? Come to find out that somebody's operating under his name, not really sure who. So the team first they go to Leeds because there was an attack there, and then they track information down to Serbia. Or, was it Serbia? May have been Serbia. Or maybe it was, I don't know. But they track the information down. They track down a guy who apparently has got information about Ilyas Surkov. And so they run into another team there working for the CIA who's been trying to track down Surkov as well. And so they're asking questions, trying to figure out what's going on. The interrogation, the techniques that the CIA team isn't working at all. And so Liz is like, all right, we got this. She and Samar go in to talk to him, and then within like a few seconds, they've got him talking. And so they're trying to get this information. All of a sudden, the CIA director, who's with Cooper at the time, calls them and says, hey, I don't know who this team is, but this team we've got looking after Surkov is not where you are. They're somewhere else. And so they realize this team is fake. And so the leader of the team starts shooting at them. They shoot back. And then one of the women that was given lines, she gets captured by the FBI team. And so they're like, who are you? And she's completely convinced that she's working for a CIA team that is trying to catch Surkov, until we come to find out that apparently the leader of this team lied to all the members of the team and saying, hey, I'm here to recruit you guys so we can track this guy down. And so the team believes that he is actually Surkov, the guy that's been running around saying, hey, I'm Surkov. And so this is where it gets a little bit interesting, because there's no real answer at the end of it. They managed to track him down to a Navy base, and Liz tracks him down into a building where he's setting up with a sniper rifle, about to take out a CIA operative. And so she runs in, she's like, don't take the shot, and he's hearing in the ear, take the shot, you gotta take the shot now. And he's saying, no, I'm just trying to stop Cox, the CIA director, because, he's been doing all this stuff. He's the one that's actually Surkov. He's been claiming that it's Surkov, but he's doing all these terrible things. I'm just trying to stop him. That's why I had to get this team together. And so Liz ultimately shoots him in the arm to keep him from killing the operative. And she's just like, well, I guess you were wrong, weren't you? All of a sudden, explosion happens on a ship. And so it's kind of like, wait, so he was right? Come back after the break, and we come to find out that apparently Cox did have a reason for the explosion. it was cutting off some sort of line that was being tapped by the enemy. And so it's kind of left up to maybe, maybe not. We're not really sure if he's actually doing all these things that are good or if he's actually a bad guy. And ultimately we see, the news report says that Ilyas Surkov is taking credit for the bombing on the ship. So it's almost like, well, that means that he must be behind it. Like, clearly he's the one causing these terrorist attacks. Even though he's saying they're for good reasons, it doesn't matter because you, as Ilyas Surkov, are claiming responsibility, which means you're spreading terror, which means you're lying out of your ass. So, yeah, it was kind of an open-ended case where we're not really sure quite how it's supposed to end, quite, I guess, who's in the right and who's in the wrong at the end of it. But ultimately, they do stop him from, or they do stop this team that were doing these things to stop Cox. I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing. Cooper kind of gives him a little bit of a lecture, but yeah, we're not really sure who's right or wrong here. But I'm assuming it'll probably come back at some point because, like I said, it is sort of open-ended. So I do hope they come back to explain it at some point, but as things stand, that's it for all of the cases of each episode. Now we gotta go into the overarching stories themselves. First of all, we start off with Red. Like I said, he's trying to regrow his empire because without his resources, without having some sort of foundation to build his empire again, he won't be able to help the FBI take down these high-end criminals. Because without resources and money and the influence that comes with the name Raymond Reddington, he won't be able to get into certain circles and track down these guys that the FBI are trying to get a hold of. So, yeah, it does sort of make sense, but at the same time, all I can think is, yeah, but you are, doing criminal things. You are growing your criminal empire again. Doesn't that still benefit you in a way? So, yeah, it's kind of an interesting, are you helping the bad guy to help yourself, or are you just helping the bad guy to help himself? Don't really know the answer to that yet, but like I said in the first episode, he does get a woman to help him with the money. Smokey Putnam is the guy that's going to help him set up certain situations. Very good at, I guess, the technical aspect of setting up certain scenes. So we see him going through all of these different channels, trying to get money. He's also trying to find the suitcase that we saw Tom had at the end of last season that has I believe Katarina's remains in it. So he's trying to track that down while also trying to grow his empire. And you can see it's kind of taking a toll on him on both accounts, because he's busy with one thing, so he doesn't really have time to do the other thing. And it's almost like now it's formed a bit of a disconnect in his team because he is doing mainly the building empire stuff while Dembe is out there tracking down information about the suitcase and who has it. So it's been kind of an interesting and almost a disconnected relationship this season. It's been weird not seeing Dembe near Raymond every single time that we see him. So I do hope they eventually, I guess, come to the end of this little storyline because I do love the Red and Dembe tag team. They're just such an awesome tag team, but we've seen so little of it so far this season. But as far as the building the empire is concerned, we see him getting certain things in every episode, whether it's getting money. Like I said, I think the whole robbing the art thief in the second episode, I think that was so he could steal that penny that apparently is worth a lot of money so he could start getting more finances. We see at one point he steals a plane from these guys that he was pretending to sell guns to. He does involve Tom in that one as well. And then in the fifth episode, the final one, he buys I think it's a dog shelter. And basically what he says is this would be the perfect place for us to sort of launder some money because at the end of the day, the IRS isn't going to look too closely at the money business of a dog shelter. Why would you? They're doing charity work here. So, yeah, it's kind of an interesting theory and, just another way for him to make more money and keep growing his empire. So that whole story has been growing pretty well. I'll be interested to see if by the halfway through the season, if he's got his empire back or if it's going to take the entire season. Not really sure. But then we move on to the suitcase itself, and this one is pretty much the main story right now. Yes, Red is growing his empire, but this is really the biggest focus because you've got Tom trying to figure out who these remains belong to. He brings the doctor Nick into it to try to help him figure out what's going on. He tells a guy named Pete about it, and next thing you know, Nick ends up dead. And so it's kind of weird to see this guy that we've seen throughout all the seasons. At one point was dating Liz. Now he's gone. And just it kind of came out of nowhere because we see him in a house at one point talking or going to track down a friend of his, and then next thing you know, he's just getting choked as Liz and Tom are talking on the couch saying, "Oh, I'm just worried about Nick. I'm worried we'll never see him again." I'm like, wow, that's kind of coincidental that you're saying that right as he's dying. But yeah, so ultimately it costs Nick his life. But we also see that Tom is trying to figure out who this Pete guy is. He's trying to track him down through several avenues. And it's just kind of, it's like is doing one thing while Red is trying to track down the information about Tom. And it's almost like a back and forth. We see them kind of almost crossing paths at one point until we get to the final, I guess, part of the last episode, the 5th episode, which is we see Tom is trying to track down Pete. He goes to a clinic where I think his girlfriend is working, and so he talks to her about trying to find Pete, and she's just like, I haven't seen him, but I want to find him too because he's been missing. And so I think we see him, and he's like shaving his head, and he looks like his hand is all like bloodied and broken. So I don't know what happened to him, but clearly something bad did happen to him. And then Red gets a phone, I guess from Pete, and tries to find out who's the last one to contact him. Like I said, this whole part, I did kind of lose focus a little bit, and I apologize for that. But he calls the last phone number to try to call this phone, and Tom picks up, of course. And so Red figures out Tom may be the one that has the suitcase, which ultimately he doesn't anymore. But this is where it looks like Red has figured out that Tom is the one that he's been looking for this whole time. And so now I'll be very interested to see how this all sort of plays out. Does Red track down Tom and just interrogate him? Does it turn into a battle back and forth? Tom running from Red. What happens? Does Red just play dumb? That's what I'm most excited to see next, is what's going to happen between these two. But yeah, this suitcase has caused a lot of problems for a lot of different people. People are dying. People are showing up missing. It's been a long, long journey just in these 5 episodes alone to find out what's going on in the suitcase. But ultimately we see that Liz is asking Red, do you know anything about who might have killed Nick? And she's like, do you have any leads? And the next scene, we don't hear what he has to say, but the next scene, Tom comes up behind her, and she's like crying. She's like, I've lost so many friends, I feel like I'm going to curl up in a fetal position just so I don't lose anybody else. And then he's just like, what do you know? Have you heard anything? Did Red find out anything? And she doesn't answer him. And the next thing you know, she's like, I think Mira's buried somewhere out there. She's like, I'm going to go find her and just have some alone time. He's like, do you need company? She's like, no, I just want to be alone. So I'm curious to know what Red said to her and if he possibly suspected Tom already and the call just confirmed his suspicions, or if he said something that maybe made her feel like, I need to be alone right now because Red has no information. I don't know. I'm curious to see what's going on there, but I don't think that Red knew Tom was behind it at that point. I don't think he had enough information, and he seemed really surprised whenever Tom picked up the phone when he called, so I don't think he knew, but I guess we'll find out later. But aside from that, there have been a few other interesting stories. One of them going back to the end of last season, wrestler killing Laurel Kitchen. Like I said at the end of last season, I still am a little bit disappointed that they sort of just played it off as he hit her and then she tripped and fell and pretty much died from that. It wasn't really a murder, it was a total accident, but at the same time, it's still pretty shocking to see Donald Wrestler, the Boy Scout, the good guy, pretty much just saying, I'm covering this up. He called the guy to cover it up, the guy came and covered it up, and so now we're dealing with that now. We're dealing with the repercussions. Because he's freaking out about it because he left the body in there, but the guy apparently made it look like a total accident. So he's like, as long as you just stay home and don't have a change of conscience, you'll be fine. But then we come to find out that the guy finds out that Wrestler's actually an FBI agent and not who Red said he was. And so now he's like, now you owe me, and I've got a bunch of tasks for you. And so he calls Wrestler at one point, and Wrestler has to come pick up a dead body in his car. I don't know why, I don't know what it leads to, but yeah, now he's doing tasks for this guy that's a cleaner. It's not going good for Wrestler right now, and you can see it is taking its toll on him. You can see how much it pains him to do this horrible stuff, but at the same time, he doesn't really have an option because he's already dug himself so deep that, yeah, it's hard to get out of this situation without already possibly, most likely doing jail time. So I'll be very interested to see where this is going, if Wrestler's going to end up in jail at the end of the season or if there's going to be some way for him to get around it. I don't know. Red at one point kind of calls him out on it because I think he knows what's going on because he says, if you're ever in a situation that you feel like you can't get out of, I'll be there to help you. And Wrestler's just like, that'll never happen. So he's denying it, but it sounds like Red already knows that something's going on. So I'll be curious to see where that's going. But that only, it was pretty much like in the first 2 or 3 episodes. The 4th and 5th ones, it didn't really pop up as much. So yeah, I'm not sure where it's going, but I'm excited to see. And then the last storyline to talk about is not as important, but still kind of, it's something that I enjoy. It's Samar and Aram, their little relationship going on. It's not one of the most important things about the show, and relationships really have never been one of the most important things. Aside from Liz and Tom, which makes sense because Liz is pretty much the main character. But as far as like the side characters, they've had their little things, their little flings, their girlfriends, their spouses. They've had the little things here and there, but for the most part, it doesn't take away from the rest of the episode. It doesn't take away from the show overall. It's just something for the side characters because they have personal lives too, and sometimes it does involve their work life as well. So now that they're dating, they start off with the first episode, showing them in a little bit of an awkward situation. Like, do we tell our coworkers? Aram's like freaking out, like, if I have a personal relationship, do I need to tell you about it? And he's being overly dramatic about it, but ultimately they find out at the end, and they're just like, awesome, good for you guys. But what this does lead to, and the reason this becomes important, is because in the 5th and final episode that I watched, we see that Samar is put into danger, and Aram freaks out about it for a moment. The CIA team takes Samar and the guy that she was, pretending to be friends with. They take her, and so she's now in mortal danger, and Aram is like freaking out about it. So at the end of the episode, he goes to Cooper, and he's just like, when she was put into danger, I froze. I couldn't do anything. And he's just like, you're right, I sure thought about it. I'm sorry. I promise I won't put you in that situation ever again. He's like, no, you don't understand. I want to be tactically trained. And so, just the thought, like, I already love Aram. He's probably my favorite character on the show just because of how he's clearly not one of the more badass characters. He's clearly one of the more cowardly and quirky characters, but he's had his moments where he had to stand up for himself and he had to step up as a character because he's going up against scary people that he doesn't have the power to take on. And so to see him at the end of this episode say, I want to be able to step up in those situations. I want to be able to have the confidence and the strength and power to step up in those situations. I want, by the end of this season, I want him to be able to take on people in like a fighting situation. It would just be awesome. So maybe that's just me, but I'm really looking forward to seeing if they're actually going to take this all the way or if this is just going to turn into kind of a joke. But as far as these first 5 episodes are concerned, it's a good start to the season. Yes, obviously there's a lot I probably missed because there's a lot to talk about, and I see I'm already at like 30 minutes now talking about just 5 episodes. But there is so much to talk about. If I missed anything that you want to talk about, please let me know in the comment section down below. If there's something that I missed that you think is really important, if there's stuff that I got wrong or that need clarification, just let me know, because I forget things easily. I have a good memory, but not after watching things one time. I have to repeat it to myself constantly before I actually memorize it. So yeah, just let me know in the comment section below. We'll talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Blacklist reviews. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace out.